Welcome to another coding tutorial, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make this falling objects that changes colors when they collide with this big circle here. What I'm about to code is actually inspired by this animation here from Thompson's collision detection article. And I actually want to highlight this article here because he has done an amazing job going through many detection collection algorithms, not only between simple shapes, but actually between many different shapes. So please check that out. I'm going to link it down below. To do this, I'm going to create a total of 3 classes. So the circle class, the rectangle class, and the ball class. Let's go here, and underneath this arrow sign, click create file. I'm going to create circle.js file, and then the next one is going to be rectangle.js, and the last one is going to be ball.js, which is going to be for our big ball in the middle. And then before we start writing the class, let's go to index.html, and then underneath this line here, let's copy this line of code 3 times. And then we're going to change the name here to the name of our classes, which are going to be circle.js, rectangle.js, and the last one is ball.js. And this is how we integrate the new files into our program. So let's go back to circle.js. Let's start writing this class. Class circle, gonna have a constructor function. And underneath the constructor function, I'm going to declare x location, and let's give it a random location within the width of the canvas. And then for a y, let's do the same. So 0 to height. And then I want to also give it a random radius. Let's do between 10 and 20. Let's draw the circle. So ellipse function takes in a total of 4 arguments, the x and y location of the center of the circle, and then the diameter. So let's do r times 2 here. And I'm going to give it a color red, but I'm going to give it an alpha value of 100, which means it's not totally opaque. Let's go back to sketch.js, and let's create just one ball first. Let's do one circle. C is going to be a new circle object, and then we're going to call the method called draw circle. Okay, and now we have a circle that is randomly placed. I want to do one more thing. I want to change the stroke to no stroke. Then now let's go back to sketch.js. We want a bunch of circles. I'm going to change this to circles array. And then instead of creating new objects underneath the setup function, I want to create new objects every time the draw function is called. So let's delete this. So how we can do that is that we can use an array method called push, and then we're going to push in new object, new circle object every time the draw function is called. And then we're going to use a for loop to loop through the length of the circle array, and then we're going to call the circle object, this draw circle function. Let's try this. There you go. So now we just have a bunch of circles that are drawn every time the draw function is called. It is kind of a lot, so I'm going to reduce the number by using a conditional statement. If random of between 0 and 10, and I also want to give it an int. So random actually output a float value or a decimal value, but by using the word floor here or the function floor, it converts this into an integer between 0 and 9. So I want to say if this expression here output a value equals to 1, then I want to push a new circle. So instead of doing it every time, it's randomly is going to do it when this expression output the number 1. And as you can see, it slows down the new object creation a little bit. And we don't want it to just populate like this. What we want is that we want the circles to be falling down. So let's go back to the circles.js file. Then let's write a new function called move circle. And move circle is going to move the y coordinate of the circle down, right? So we also need dy. And how fast do we want it to move? Let's give it, how about 2? And so this dot y is going to be equals to this dot y plus this dot dy. But I also want to change this from random 0, height. I want it to start from the top of the canvas, but instead of actually have it start from the top, I want it to go a little bit above. So I can do that by, what if I set it between, let's do -50. So it's 50 pixels above, but it's gonna be random. So it's gonna give it that like falling kind of rain feeling. Okay, let's try this. Oh, we need to call move function. So you can do this, move circle, and then let's actually call it before we draw. And there you go. So now we have a bunch of circles that are falling down, kind of like a circle rain or snow. All right. Next, we want to do the same thing for a rectangle. So let's go to rectangle.js. Then let's create a class called rectangle. Inside the constructor function, we're going to have this dot x to be random between 0 and width. For this dot y, it's going to be random, and then let's do -50 as well. And then we need width and height, right? I want it to be random between, let's do width to be 10 and 20, same as height. You can change these values as you wish, right? And then we want to draw the rectangle. So let's call it draw rect. We're going to use the rect function. So it's going to be this dot x, this dot y, this dot w, and this dot h. And I'm going to give it a color of magenta and an alpha value of 100 as well. Okay, and then we also want to move the rectangle down by dx, by dy. Let's do the same amount. And then it's this dot y equals to this dot y plus this dot dy. Then go back to sketch.js. We're going to also create a rectangles array. And we're going to push this every time the if statement is true. So we're going to create new rectangle objects. And we're going to also call the rectangles array using a for loop. And a to method, which is to move the rectangle and to draw the rectangles, right? Okay, let's try it. Rectangles. Ta-da! Okay, so now we have falling rectangles and falling circles. The last piece is that we need to write a ball function. So let's come here. So class ball is going to have a constructor function as well. And then I want to give it x and y parameters here because I want to set it as the x and y mouse location, or mouse x and mouse y. So this dot x equals to x, this dot y equals to y. Let's give it a radius of, how about 25? And then draw a ball. We are going to draw the ball, which is going to be an ellipse, right? At this dot x location and this dot y location, this dot r times 2, this dot r times 2. And let's make it maybe like a darker gray, so 100. Okay, before we do anything, let's try to, let's try to create this object first. So let ball equals to a new ball object at mouse x and mouse y. And we're going to need to keep calling or setting the mouse x and mouse y location here. And don't forget to draw it. Okay. What do we need to do next? We need to write the collision detection algorithms, right? Between circle and circle and between circle and rectangle. Let's go back to ball.js, and I'm going to write a collided function. But this collided function, we need to also figure out if we're colliding with a circle or a rectangle. So let's give a parameter as object. Before we figure out if it's a rectangle or a circle, first let's write the code for when two circles collide. So let's just assume that this object is a circle. To know if the ball collides with the circle's objects, we need to check if the distance between the center of the circle and the center of the ball is less than the radius of the two objects combined or not. So first, let's find the distance by using the dist function here. So it's going to be between the object x and y location and the ball x and y location. If distance is less than or equals to the two radius, right, the two radii combined, so object dot r plus this dot r, then this dot collide is true, and else this dot collide is false. Then we need to also set this dot collide here as false. So now we assume that all the objects here are going to be circles. So let's go back to sketch.js, and underneath this for loop here, I am going to check ball.collided, and then the argument will be circles of index I. They're colliding, but we have not actually visually set anything yet. So go back to ball.js file here. Actually, I did something wrong. So we don't need this Boolean expression here, because what we want is that we want to tell the object that its collide Boolean variable is true, not the ball's Boolean variable. And then inside the circle.js file here, we want to set this .collide to be false. And if it is set to true, then what I want it to do is that I want it to change the color from red to yellow. If this .collide is true, then fill to 55 to 55.0 and with an alpha of 100. Else, then stay this red color. Let's try this. Okay, so now the circles change color to yellow when they collide with this ball. Perfect. Now let's do the same for the rectangles. So we need to go back to ball.js. But now, how do we know if the object is a circle or a rectangle? I am going to set a Boolean variable. If object.circle is true, then we call this piece of code here else, then we will call something else. So else is when the object is a rectangle. So let's go back to circle.js and create this variable. This.circle equals to true. And then inside the rectangle one, this dot circle is going to be false. All right. Inside the ball.js, now we need to write collision detection between a circle and a rectangle. And we need to do a total of 3 steps. The first one is that we need to figure out where the ball is relative to the edges of the rectangle. So first, I am going to create 2 variables called close x and close y, and I'm going to initialize them as the x and y locations of the circle or the ball. So this.x and this.y. But now we need to write conditional statements. So the first one is if the ball x coordinate is more than object.x plus object.w or not. So is it on the right side of the rectangle? If it is, then close x is going to be equals to that edge, the right edge. Else, if this.x is less than object.x, which means it's on the left edge, right? So close x will be set to this.x. And then now on the y side, so this.y is more than object.y plus object.h, then close y will be set at object.y plus object.h. Oh, this one has to be this has to be object.x. We want to set it at the rectangle's edge, right? Okay, so the last conditional statement is if this.y is less than object.y, then we are going to set close y to be equals to object.y. Once we know where the circle is, then the second step is that we need to check the distance between the edge and the center of the ball. Let distance equals to dist. This is a built-in function in p5.js that calculates the distance between 2 points. So we want close x, close y as the first point, and then the center of the circle, which is this.x and this.y. And then the last step is we will know if these 2 objects collide, the rectangle and the ball, is if the distance is less than or equals to the ball radius, then we want to set object.collide to be true. And else, they're not colliding, so false. So we wrote quite a bit of code here, so let's see that it works. Let's try it. Nope, it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because I think we need to write conditional statements here to change the color, right? So if, let's do this.collide to be false first. If this.collide, then set it to yellow. Else, just keep it red. What I forgot is that I forgot to call this function here, ball.collided. Silly me. Okay, so we want to call this rectangles. And there you go. So now the rectangles and the circles changed to yellow. Pretty, huh? I think there is so much that you can work from this base code, even though this looks quite interesting already, but give it a try and see what you can come up with your imagination.